I'm going to talk about an itinerary for your travel. Rather than have you looking at me wobbling my jowls at you, I've got the camera focused on a beautiful lilac tree. It's in our front yard. Unfortunately you can't smell it, but at least you can enjoy the visual aspect. Now for an itinerary, I'm going to put a disclaimer in. I'm talking about travel from Australia to Manila and to a provincial town. Now there are lots of cheap flights available from Australia to Manila. Not all of them are direct. You can pick up a very cheap one by some of these discount airline facilities, but you're looking at transferring between several airlines and you might end up with crash and burn airlines halfway along it. I know you can fly from Canberra to Singapore and Singapore to Manila, but it takes about 12 hours and you've got a 3-hour wait in Singapore. There are other ones that are cheaper still, but you'll find that you might have to change planes at both Jakarta or Hong Kong or Singapore or someplace in China. And again, it's a 12-hour trip and you have layovers in strange airports in strange countries. Qantas Australia, they have daily flights direct to and from Manila, from Sydney and also Melbourne. But the catch is, being daylight, they arrive in Manila in the afternoon when it's peak hour traffic, and it's ideal if you're going to just stay in Manila for a while. But if you're trying to connect to a domestic airline, you've got no hope, because it's going to take you at least an hour to transfer from the main airport, well that's Terminal 1, to get to the domestic airlines, which is my airlines 2, 3 or 4. And as they have curfews on their nighttime flights, you're looking at actually a layover in Manila. That can be expensive. There are places you can stay there for your layover, but I won't cover those at the moment. But I'm going to talk about our itinerary. We're going to fly Philippine Airlines, or PAL, P-A-L. Now, PAL flies in a triangular setup in opposite directions. One flight goes from Manila to Sydney to Melbourne, and then Melbourne direct back to Manila. The other flight flies the opposite direction of the triangle, from Manila to Melbourne direct, and then from Melbourne to Sydney, and then Sydney to Manila. Now the Sydney to Manila bits are daytime flights. They leave in the early morning, and again they have that issue, they get into Manila in the evening and you'll have difficulty connecting with a domestic flight. The same on the return trip. They leave early in the morning, Manila, and they get into Sydney in the evening, which is okay if you happen to be staying in Manila and you've got places to stay in Sydney. Now we have looked into this and found, even though these daytime flights are cheaper, the overnight flights are a bit more expensive, but they have the advantage that there's no accommodation involved. We can catch a bus to Sydney. It costs us $70 for the pair of us, and it drops us off at the airport. We can then connect with the PAL flight that arrived from Manila to Sydney, and we can catch that flight Sydney to Melbourne, and that's from about 8 in the evening through to 10 o'clock. We then have a 1 hour layover in Melbourne, and then at 11 o'clock it departs direct to Manila. And you can sleep on the plane, well, in a fashion. But it has the advantage of getting into Manila around about 6 in the morning. And it lands in at Terminal 2. Now we happen to be going to Tagbilaran, and the flight to Tagbilaran will be on PAL Express, which is a subsidiary of PAL, and it departs from Terminal 2. So just a matter of getting off the plane from Melbourne, grabbing some breakfast, and going through customs and immigration, and walking to the other end of the terminal, and about 10 o'clock we can then catch a plane to Tagbilaran. When it comes to the return trip, we'll probably do the same thing, from Manila to Melbourne, Melbourne to Sydney, and gets into Sydney in the morning. We can catch a bus from the Sydney airport back to our home town. The reason why I suggest that one is because to get to the flight to Manila, it's in the evening. You would have to leave your regional province about 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock in the morning. If you want to catch the daytime flight direct to Sydney, you would have to stay in Manila, and again the accommodation costs would outweigh any discount you'd get on the flight. Anyway, that's probably something to think about. We had a quick costing about it. It's going to cost $2,040 for the pair of us to travel Sydney, Melbourne, Melbourne, Manila, Manila, Tagbilaran, return. Then we got the $70 bus fare to Sydney, $70 back. That's $140. But that's a lot cheaper than the $175 each they're quoting to take us to Melbourne by a discount airline. And again, some of the discount airlines, they're on a weight basis. Now, a quick little note regarding transport to Manila. They've now brought in a new system where the airlines companies have a bus that runs between all the terminals. Go to the terminal bus office and find out your details from there. Don't take information from anybody carrying a card with prices or wearing a suspect uniform offering to take you to the bus. They'll charge you a fee, which they will say is the bus fare, and I believe the bus fares are free. Not sure of that, but to check up on that. But anyway, what these fellas do, they charge you a fee, they take your luggage to the bus for you, and you really don't have to pay it. Also now too, there's a new accommodation area called the Resorts Complex. Yeah, it's located opposite Terminal 3. If you do have to lay over in Manila, check it out, because there's about 4 or 5 different types of hotels in there of different stars. There's star ratings, 5-star down to the basic, and they are connected to the airport now by their own bus system. You might have to wait half an hour or an hour, but it's better than being ripped off by a taxi going around in circles for 2 hours. I believe there's one hotel there we looked at called the Remington. It's about 3 to 3.5 star. On the average it gets a very good write-up. There are a few people who complain about it. They're normally the ones who want everything hand-weighted on them, hand and foot. But if you're just going there for a layover for one day, one night, it's ideal. And it's quite next to Terminal 3, which is where all the domestic flights come in there from. Well, most of the domestic flights come in. That's all I've got to say about it now, but just consider the fact that if you fly overnight and you can arrive in Manila in the morning, you can then connect with a flight to the province. If you're going to arrive in the evening, you probably won't get a flight, because you've got about at least 3 hours processing before you get on board the plane. And also, there are some times to avoid. Do not expect to get a domestic flight around Easter time. You can get a cheap commercial flight into Manila, but you won't get very far from there on, because over Easter everybody wants to go home. And if you're not in early, you'll find planes, buses, ferries, trains, boats, everything is booked out by the time Holy Thursday comes. So that's a bit of a warning. Also, with some of the cheaper airlines, they will sometimes cancel a flight if they have not got enough passengers aboard. I know some people had some problems with Cebu Air, I think it is, or Air Express, and Zest and Scoot, their national domestic airlines over there. If they haven't got enough passengers to make it worthwhile, they'll just cancel the flight, and you won't find out till you get to the airport. Then you find that you have missed out on your connecting international flight back home. So just make sure you just check very carefully the reliability of your carrier. We're taking PAL. It might be a bit more expensive, but we're used to it, and we know the itinerary, and it'll suit us. Anyway, that's all for me now. We'll get you a little bit more later on.